My husband's mistress called me a nobody on my own set. She opened one prop box on live TV and found her eviction. Notice my divorce papers and the truth that ended her career. I never told my husband's mistress that I created the show that made her famous. She tried to get me fired. I changed one line. On live TV, she opened the prop box and found an eviction notice and divorce papers inside. "Cut," I said. "Your career is over." The air inside Soundstage 4 always tasted faintly of ozone, burnt coffee, and other people's ambitions. I know that sounds like a pretentious thing to say, but when you have spent 12 years quietly breathing that air, watching it turn starlets into legends, nobodies into cover stories, and mediocre men into self-proclaimed kings, you develop a particular relationship with the atmosphere of a place. You learn what it is really made of. I was standing in the wings that Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in an oversized oatmeal-colored cardigan and faded jeans I had worn so many times they had molded to my shape like a second skin. My fingers were curled around a battered leather notebook, its spine cracked and soft from years of use. To anyone looking, and nobody was, because nobody ever was, I was just another warm body in the peripheral blur of a busy set. A prop. A ghost. The quiet, harmless, mildly embarrassing wife of Mark Sterling, studio manager. Let me tell you something about Mark Sterling. He had the kind of confidence that only exists in men who have never truly earned anything. He wore it the same way he wore his Italian suits, expensively, loudly, and on someone else's credit. He did not build this studio. He did not build the show that ran inside it. He did not write a single syllable of the dialogue that 10 million people quoted on social media every Monday morning. But if you had watched him strut across Soundstage 4, slapping camera operators on the back, and nodding at monitors with the gravity of a man decoding the Rosetta Stone, you would have sworn he had invented television itself. I did not correct the impression. I never did. That was the deal I had made with myself, and with the small, encrypted corner of the world that knew the truth. The show was called City Lights. It had run for 5 seasons, won 14 Emmy Awards, launched 3 feature film careers, and generated a revenue stream with so many zeros behind it that my accountant had to use a separate spreadsheet just for the commas. It had been created, written, and entirely controlled by a reclusive, notoriously private showrunner known to the industry only as S.L. Knight. S.L. Knight was me, Sarah Leanne Knight Sterling, and the only people who knew that were my entertainment lawyer, my offshore account manager, the encrypted server in a facility outside Boulder, Colorado, and now you. I had kept the secret for 7 years because I wanted the work to speak, not the identity. I had kept it because Hollywood has a particular, suffocating way of attaching a woman's name to her husband's legacy instead of her own. I had kept it because anonymity was armor, and I had learned early that armor is worth more than recognition. But mostly, and I will be honest here, I kept it because keeping secrets is its own kind of power, and I have always been better at power than anyone around me has suspected. I had been watching the production of Season 5 from a careful distance for 8 months when I first noticed the shift in Mark. It was not dramatic. Nothing about the beginning of a betrayal ever is. It was small, incremental things. The way he started tilting his phone screen away from me when a message came through. The new cologne. A sharp citrus thing I did not recognize and had not bought. The way he had stopped asking about my work entirely. Not out of disinterest, but out of the specific, deliberate absence that only happens when someone is filling their curiosity elsewhere. I told myself it was stress. Season 5 was the biggest production he, to the world, had ever overseen. The live finale was a gamble the network had been terrified of, and ultimately sold on, after I quietly submitted a 40-page production memo to the head of programming under my pseudonym, detailing exactly how it could be executed with minimal financial risk and maximum cultural impact. Mark had taken the memo into the pitch meeting and presented it as his own strategic vision. The network had given him a standing ovation. He had come home that night and told me he had crushed it. "I know," I had said, pouring him a glass of wine. He had not asked what I meant. He never did. The first time I saw Tiffany Blair interact with my husband in a way that was not professional, I was standing exactly where I had been standing that Tuesday. In the wings, cardigan, notebook, invisible. It was a Thursday in March, 6:47 p.m. The last rehearsal before a table read. Mark had leaned down and said something close to her ear. She had laughed, not the bright, performed laugh she used with the crew, but a smaller, private one, the kind you only give to someone who is already inside your walls. My hands did not shake, my stomach did not drop. I felt something go very still inside me, the way deep water goes still just before a current takes hold underneath the surface. I told myself it was nothing. I was wrong, and I knew I was wrong, and I filed the knowledge away like a document I was not ready to open yet. Tiffany Blair had been a mid-level television actress with a respectable reel and a ferocious publicist when I wrote the character of Elena Voss, specifically with her range in mind. That was 3 years ago. I had seen her in a small cable drama, a nothing role, 3 episodes, mostly reaction shots, and something about the way she held a scene's silence had struck me. She was better than the material she was being given. I thought I could change that. I wrote Elena Voss as the fulcrum of city lights. Every other character in the show orbited her like moons around a gravity well. The Season 5 live finale was built to be her crowning moment, a 12-minute final monologue that I had rewritten 11 times over 7 months until every single word was load-bearing. Critics who had read the locked script through secure channels were already calling it the greatest piece of television writing since The Sopranos cut to black. I had made Tiffany Blair. I had handed her the tools for her own legend. She had absolutely no idea. The Tuesday everything collapsed, started like any other production day, which is to say, it started in controlled chaos and ended in a different kind entirely. I arrived on set at 2:15 p.m. I had a meeting with the broadcast director, Cameron Reyes, 17 years in live television, a man who treated every frame like it was being projected on the moon, scheduled for 2:30 to discuss the technical logistics of the finale's final sequence. I was attending as myself, as Sarah, as the supportive wife who occasionally liked to watch the production from the shadows. Cameron thought I was there out of wifely enthusiasm. He was polite about it, in the way busy men are polite about things they find mildly inconvenient. I was actually there because I had designed the final sequence down to the camera angle, and I needed to confirm that the prop box would be delivered to the correct mark on the stage floor at the correct time. But that conversation was for later. At 2:22 p.m., before I could reach Cameron's station, Tiffany swept past me. I had been standing at the edge of the set near the craft services table, reviewing my notebook. She came through the double doors from the hair and makeup trailer, surrounded by a small atmospheric system of assistants and expensive perfume, wearing the scarlet silk gown from the finale, and moving with the specific momentum of someone who had recently been convinced they were the center of the universe. She stopped when she nearly walked into me. She looked me up and down, slowly, publicly, with the performative deliberateness of someone who wanted witnesses. Her mouth curled at the corner. "Who let the help stay on set during technical rehearsals?" she said. Not to me, but to Jake Ellison, the first AD, 26 years old, in his 3rd month on the job, still visibly terrified of everyone above him. Which was everyone. Jake's face went the color of unpainted drywall. He started. "She looks like a stalker fan who wandered off the street," Tiffany continued, as if I were not standing close enough to touch. "I need civilians off my set. I have a live national broadcast in 6 hours, and I cannot work with this kind of energy in my space." She pressed 2 fingers to her temple. "Get her out." The stone that dropped in my stomach was cold and precise, like a key fitting into a lock. I looked past her, past Jake's sweating face, past the camera operators pretending not to hear. Mark was standing by the monitoring station. He had seen everything. He was walking toward us. I remember thinking, with a clarity that surprised me, that this was the moment I would find out which version of my husband was the real one. The one who loved me, or the one I had been quietly watching emerge for 8 months. He walked up to us. He looked at me, then at Tiffany. He placed his hand on the curve of her waist. Not a professional hand, not a steadying, a nervous actress hand. A hand that knew exactly where it was. "Sorry, Tiff," he murmured. "I'll handle it." He looked at me. His eyes were blank. Not angry, not guilty. Blank. As if I were a mildly inconvenient logistical problem. As if 12 years of a shared life had been filed under administrative issues, and he had already delegated it to someone else. "Sarah, honey, maybe go wait in the car. You're distracting the talent." "The talent. I'll have my assistant send your things over later," he continued, quieter now, leaning in with the practiced calm of a man who had rehearsed this conversation many times in his own head. Just leave the keys on the counter when you go. Have my things sent. Keys on the counter. In front of a grip crew of 11 people and one terrified first A.D. 12 years dismissed in the same tone you would use to cancel a lunch reservation. I nodded once. I did not cry. I did not say anything cutting, or large, or memorable, and I could see a flicker of something in Mark's face. Relief, mostly. Relief when he realized I was going to be quiet and compliant and easy about this, just like I had always been about everything. I turned and walked toward the exit. I passed the craft services table on the way out. Mark's phone was resting against a fruit tray. Screen up. Unlocked. It lit up as I walked past. I did not stop walking, but I read the notification. In the half-second it was visible, with the particular efficiency of someone who has spent years noticing details other people miss. It was from Tiffany. Can't wait for tonight, baby. When are you finally telling that fan of yours about the penthouse? I want to start moving in tomorrow. I stopped. The neon exit sign buzzed faintly above me. The penthouse. The multi-million-dollar downtown loft I had purchased 6 weeks ago through one of my holding companies. A quiet, anonymous acquisition I had made as an investment property because the market timing was right. And I liked the floor-to-ceiling windows and the building's bones. I had mentioned it to Mark as a potential investment. I had not told him which holding company had bought it, because Mark did not know the full architecture of my financial life. He knew I had inherited money from my grandmother. He did not know about the royalties from 7 years of a top 10 television drama, or the licensing rights, or the production equity stakes, or any of the other quietly compounding rivers of income that had been flowing into a network of accounts he had no legal access to. He thought the penthouse was his idea. He thought it was going to be their love nest. It was mine. The deed was in my name through a shell company he did not know existed. I pushed through the soundproof exit doors and walked into the California sun. My hands were perfectly steady. My mind was a very cold, very clear room. I drove to the office of Raymond Henderson, senior partner of Henderson and Associates, 46th floor, Century City. Raymond charged $1,100 an hour. He had appeared on the cover of The American Lawyer 3 times and had a reputation for being the kind of litigator who makes opposing counsel reconsider their career choices. I had had him on retainer for 4 years. Mark did not know that either. Raymond's office smelled of expensive scotch and the specific leather that only appears in rooms where very serious decisions are made. He listened to me for 12 minutes without interrupting, which is how I knew the situation was serious. Raymond always interrupted. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. The prenuptial agreement you signed in 2012, he said, contains both a fidelity clause and a moral turpitude clause. If infidelity can be demonstrated, and based on what you've described, it can be demonstrated quite clearly. He is entitled to nothing beyond what he brought into the marriage, which is a 2008 Honda Civic, and approximately $14,000 in a savings account. Raymond allowed himself a very small smile. However, there's more. I slid the secondary folder across his desk. I initiated a quiet audit of Mark's studio production accounts 3 weeks ago, I said. He's been pulling funds through a series of petty cash disbursements and inflated vendor invoices. 8 months, approximately $340,000 redirected into a personal account. Private flights, jewelry, hotel suites, all traceable. Raymond opened the folder. His eyebrows moved approximately 4 millimeters upward, which from Raymond constituted an expression of extreme astonishment. This triggers the moral turpitude clause in his employment contract, he said slowly, reading the bank transfers. I had had a forensic accountant compile over the previous 3 weeks, and constitutes felony wire fraud and corporate embezzlement under California and federal law. Yes, he'll face prison time. I know. Raymond looked at me over the rim of his glasses. How do you want the papers served, Sarah? I turned my chair to face the flat-screen monitor he kept mounted on the wall, a live feed from the studio's closed-circuit security system that I had arranged remote access to through a vendor agreement my holding company controlled. On the screen, in crisp, high-definition clarity, Tiffany Blair was rehearsing her blocking on Soundstage 4. She was standing at the fireplace mantel, reaching toward an ornate wooden box, her face arranged into the practiced, beautiful architecture of theatrical grief. In front of 10 million people, I said. I want her to open the box on live television. Raymond was quiet for a moment. That is, he said carefully, a remarkably efficient piece of legal delivery. I turned back to face him. I also need the eviction notice for the downtown penthouse completed by 6 p.m. She has 24 hours to vacate my property. He nodded slowly, making a note. I'll have both documents couriered to the prop master by 5:30. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and picked up my briefcase. One more thing, I said. The security team at the studio is employed through Redline Talent Management, which is a subsidiary of your holding company. Raymond confirmed, checking his notes. Which means the guards on set tonight take their operational orders from me, not from the studio manager. I paused. Make sure the process server coordinates with the guard on the west entrance. His name is David Okafor. He has been briefed. Raymond watched me walk to the door, with the expression of a man who had spent his entire career in rooms with powerful people and was still occasionally surprised by them. Sarah, he said. I turned. Remind me to never be on the opposing side of anything involving you. I smiled. You already know which side you're on, Raymond. That's why I pay you $1,100 an hour. I left the law office at 4:18 p.m. Sitting in my car in the parking structure, I opened my encrypted laptop and accessed the master script file for the City Lights Season 5 finale. It was password protected behind 3 independent layers of authentication that only I controlled. The production team had a read-only copy distributed through the studio's internal server. The master file, the one the broadcast director would pull the final camera cues from, the one that fed directly into the live teleprompter system, was mine. I scrolled past 5 years of carefully built narrative, past the character introductions and the season arc turns, the mid-season twist I had rewritten 4 times, the secondary storylines I had seeded across 3 seasons for this exact payoff, past 47 pages of the finale itself, through the rising action, through the second act confrontations, through every syllable of Elena Voss's journey toward the box on the mantel. I stopped at page 48. Tiffany's 12-minute monologue. The scene that was supposed to make her immortal. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I thought about the 7 months I had spent writing those pages. I thought about the care that had gone into every pause, every breath, every carefully weighted word. I thought about how it felt to write something true enough that it made you cry at your own desk at 2 a.m., while your husband was asleep in the next room, already dreaming of someone else. I selected the monologue, all 12 pages of it. I hit delete. The cursor blinked in the white space where the words had been. I typed a single stage direction. The truth is delivered. I saved the file, encryption locked, pushed live to the broadcast server. Then I opened a secure email, set it to route through 2 anonymous proxy servers, and composed a message to Cameron Reyes, the broadcast director, and Marcus Webb, the head prop master. From SL. Night. Final scene revision. A locked prop box is being couriered to the set for the climax sequence. Do not open it before airtime. The final scene has been revised for maximum emotional authenticity. The actress's genuine reaction is integral to the artistic effect. Trust the process. This is the version that airs. I hit send. Then I drove back to the studio. By 7 p.m., Soundstage 4 had transformed into the particular electric ecosystem of a live broadcast. Live television has its own physics. Gravity is different. Sound moves differently. People walk faster and speak in sharper, shorter bursts, and the air itself seems to vibrate at a slightly higher frequency than normal reality. I slipped into the control room at 7:14 and found a stool in the back corner, behind a bank of monitors and a sound mixing board the size of a dining table. The room was full. Director, technical director, script coordinator, network liaisons, 2 executive producers whose combined anxiety filled the room like a fog. At 7:43, Mark walked in. He was wearing a headset and his best Italian suit, and 2 of the network's senior executives were flanking him the way junior planets orbit a sun. He was nodding sagely at something one of them was saying, projecting the absolute confidence of a man who believed tonight was his crowning moment, the pinnacle of his career, his name on the biggest live broadcast the network had aired in a decade. He saw me in the back of the room. His face moved through approximately 4 distinct expressions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, irritation, contempt, and then the particular smug satisfaction of a man who believed he had already won. He detached from the executives and walked to me, lowering his voice. I told you to go home, Sarah. I know you did, I said. I picked up a styrofoam cup of peppermint tea from the console beside me and took a slow sip. This is embarrassing. His jaw tightened. For you. Tonight is. I know what tonight is, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Really looked, in the way he had stopped doing about 18 months ago, and something flickered across his face that might have been unease. Then he smoothed it back over, with the practiced confidence of someone who had never truly had to reckon with consequences, and walked back to the executives. Stand by camera 1. Cameron's voice crackled over the room's internal speakers. 10 to air. Everyone on your marks. And we do this clean. The monitors lit up in sequence. On the primary screen, Soundstage 4 bloomed in cinematic shadow and light. The set of Elena Voss's living room, every prop carefully sourced, every shadow intentionally placed, right down to the ornate wooden box on the fireplace mantel, looked the way only things I have cared about very deeply ever look, like it was built to contain something true. 30 seconds. Tiffany stood at her mark, scarlet gown catching the light, face composed into the specific, radiant grief she wore best. She was good. I had never stopped believing that, even now. And Liv, the first 8 minutes of the finale, ran exactly as scripted. The cast was extraordinary. The direction was precise. Cameron Reyes earned whatever I was paying him, and I was paying him handsomely, through the studio's operating budget, through my holding company's accounts, in the particular invisible way that all of my power had always worked. I watched the primary monitor, and I felt, underneath everything else, the specific, bittersweet satisfaction of seeing something you built operating at its highest possible level. Whatever was about to happen, whatever Tiffany's face was going to do when she opened that box, this was still my work. Still the thing I had built. Nobody could take that. On screen, Elena Voss moved through the final scene with the inevitability of a story that had been building toward a single moment for 5 years. She crossed the room. She climbed the 2 steps to the fireplace. She reached out with trembling hands toward the ornate wooden box. In the control room, a junior production assistant leaned over to whisper something to a colleague. Mark was watching the primary monitor with his arms crossed, chin lifted, radiating the pride of a man being credited for something he did not make. The truth, Tiffany whispered on screen, her voice perfectly breaking on the second word. Finally, she flipped the brass latch. The lid clicked open. She looked down into the box. I have thought, since, about what that moment looked like from the outside, from the perspective of the 10 million people watching at home, the way a person's face moves when reality restructures itself. When the architecture of the life they believed they were living suddenly and irrevocably shifts. Tiffany's face went from performed tragedy to genuine, total shock in approximately 1.8 seconds. The blood left her skin so fast, it looked like a tide going out. Her eyes, usually so controlled, so precisely targeted, went wide and unfocused. The eyes of someone whose stage directions had just been rewritten in a language they did not speak. She reached into the box. She pulled out a thick legal folder bearing the seal of Henderson and Associates. This, her voice broke, real this time, cracked clean down the middle. This isn't. She looked up from the folder. Her eyes found camera 1 and stared directly into it, into the homes of 10 million people. Mark! Mark! In the control room, Cameron's voice went an octave higher. She's off script. Cut to camera 2. Now! Camera 2 is locked out, the technical director shouted, hands moving across the board in controlled panic. Someone overrode it. I can't. We're hardwired on camera 1. Who authorized this? I stood up from my stool. I walked to the side door of the control room. I pushed it open. I stepped directly onto the edge of Soundstage 4. The stage was live, hot mics everywhere. The studio audience was sitting in the kind of stunned, held-breath silence you only get when something is happening that nobody has been given permission to react to yet. My boots made a sound on the concrete floor. 1 step. 2. I walked past the velvet curtain that separated the wings from the performance space and stepped directly into the hard white blaze of the primary spotlight. I looked into camera 1. For a moment, one quiet, specific, entirely my own moment. I looked into that lens, and I thought about the woman who had sat in a dark home office for 7 years, writing the words that built this world. The woman who had made herself a ghost so the work could live. The woman who had mistaken invisibility for safety and silence for peace. Then I turned to Tiffany. "Cut," I said. The word rang out through 16 boom mics suspended above the soundstage. It landed in the silent studio like a stone into still water. Tiffany stumbled backward. The legal folders fell from her hands and scattered across the stage floor, their contents fanning across the concrete, crisp white legal documents with black type catching the spotlight. "Sarah." Her voice was barely a voice. "What are you? Get off my—" "The scene is over, Tiffany," I said. I stepped closer. I did not rush. I have always believed in the power of measured pacing. And so is your contract. I pointed to the folder at her feet, the one whose first page was visible to camera one. "That is a formal eviction notice for the downtown penthouse. My money paid for it. My holding company holds the deed. You have 24 hours to remove your belongings from my property." I pointed to the second folder. Beneath it are divorce papers, fully executed, citing the prenuptial fidelity clause that renders my husband legally entitled to exactly nothing. The studio audience made a sound I have never heard a live audience make before. It was not applause, and it was not gasping. It was both, layered on top of each other, the sound of 10,000 people processing the same impossible realization simultaneously. I turned away from Tiffany. I faced the cameras. I faced the crew, the grips and the gaffers, and the camera operators, and the sound engineers, and every single exhausted, underpaid person who had built this world alongside me without knowing it. "For anyone in the network suites who's wondering," I said, my voice clear and unhurried, and carrying easily through the hot mics above me, "I am S.L. Knight. I own this show. I own this studio. And effective immediately, I've decided the lead character has been written out." The soundstage erupted. Mark came through the control room doors at a sprint. He crossed the stage in 7 seconds and stopped approximately 4 feet from me. His face the color of a bruise, a vein in his temple making itself visible in a way I had never seen before. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You crazy!" He stopped himself, remembered the cameras, looked at camera one, looked back at me. The calculation in his face was visible from 10 feet away, strategy warring with fury, and fury winning. "Security!" he shouted. "Get her off this lot! She's trespassing! This is my set! This is my—" He lunged. David Okafor stepped out of the stage right wing. David is 6'3" and spent 8 years as a federal corrections officer before joining private security. He stepped smoothly between Mark and me, and Mark ran directly into his chest and stopped as completely as if he had hit a wall, which he essentially had. David reached into his jacket pocket with one hand. He produced a thick manila envelope. He pressed it into Mark's chest with measured, precise force. "Mr. Sterling," David said, his voice warm and absolutely calm, and picked up clearly by every live microphone on the stage. "You're being served. Felony corporate embezzlement and wire fraud. Federal charges." He placed a steady hand on Mark's shoulder. "The authorities are in the lobby. Please come with me." Mark looked at me. I looked back at him. I did not say anything. There was nothing left to say. His face said everything. The collapse of every constructed fiction he had been living inside. The specific, terrible moment when a man who has never faced consequences meets the first real one of his life. The live feed cut to black. The tabloids called it the greatest script flip in television history. A national morning show devoted 40 minutes to it the following day. The forensic breakdown of my financial architecture. The S.L. Knight revelation. The live arrest. It ran in cycles for 2 weeks. My inbox received 4,200 emails in 72 hours. I read 11 of them. Tiffany was dropped by her agency within 48 hours. Her endorsement contracts followed. A skincare brand, an athleisure line, a fragrance deal, collectively worth $8 million. 3 studios she had been in preliminary talks with went silent simultaneously. The internet is a fast and merciless judge, and the image of her face in that moment, the moment reality showed up inside a prop box, became the defining image of the cultural conversation for the better part of a month. She was not offered another role of significance. The industry has a long memory for liability. Mark was arraigned on 4 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of corporate embezzlement. His attorney, a third-tier entertainment lawyer, who had clearly never seen a prenup as airtight as mine, spent approximately 15 minutes reviewing the financial documentation before advising Mark to consider a plea agreement. The Honda Civic, it turned out, had an outstanding parking ticket. That was, to within statistical rounding, the entirety of what he was walking away with. The federal charges carried a potential sentence of 4 to 6 years. I moved into Mark's old office. I had it gutted and redesigned. Clean lines, natural light, a reclaimed oak desk, none of the heavy leather and aggressive masculinity he had used to compensate for things he did not have. My new assistant was a 24-year-old named Clara, who could read a script with the precision of a surgeon and had opinions about story structure that she had been carefully suppressing for months. She was exceptional. I gave her a raise in her first week and told her opinions were what I was paying for. I produced Season 5's replacement finale, recast, restructured, featuring Elena Voss's exit from the narrative in a way I had actually been holding in reserve for 2 seasons, waiting for the right moment. It won 3 Emmys. The rival studio's head called me 6 weeks after the broadcast. He had been trying to unmask S.L. Knight for years. He was polite, which surprised me, and serious, which did not. He wanted the political thriller. I told him I would have my people send the contract. 6 months later, the Los Angeles air was cool and smelled like rain and expensive things. I stood on the red carpet outside the Microsoft Theater for the Emmy Awards. My name was on the marquee. Both names, together, for the first time. Sarah Sterling, S.L. Knight, the same person. Not a secret anymore, not a ghost. I was wearing a midnight blue gown I had chosen myself without asking anyone's opinion. My publicist. I have a publicist now, which still occasionally surprises me, was running interference on the press line. I looked across the boulevard. There was an all-night diner, the kind with flickering neon and outdoor seating. A woman in a stained apron was wiping down patio tables, her face hidden under the brim of a baseball cap. Her shoulders had a particular slope to them, the kind that comes from being very recently accustomed to a different kind of life. I recognized her. I did not feel what I expected to feel, which was vindication, the sharp, bright satisfaction of watching a fall from Graceland. What I felt was quieter, a kind of closing, the specific piece of a story that had reached its natural end. I thought about the woman I had been on, Soundstage 4, that Tuesday afternoon. Cardigan. Notebook. Invisible. Standing in the wings of something I had built. Watching someone else take credit for the architecture. Telling myself the invisibility was a choice I was making and not a slow erosion I had failed to notice. I thought about the 12 years of meals and questions I had not been asked, and ambitions I had learned to mention quietly, and then, not at all. I thought about the dark home office, the encrypted server, the late nights that were the only hours that had ever fully belonged to me. I turned away from the diner and looked up at the billboard for City Lights. New cast, new lead. My words, still. My world, still. More completely mine now than it had ever been. The cameras were going off in long, strobing bursts. My name was in lights. Sarah, over here, give us a smile. I looked into the lights. I did not shrink. I smiled. Not the small, careful, don't make a scene smile I had worn for 12 years as a reflex, a survival mechanism, a way of making myself smaller in rooms where I had already made the walls. This smile was mine, radiant, specific, completely my own. I had spent over a decade allowing other people to narrate my life, letting Mark play the visionary, letting Tiffany play the star, casting myself as the silent extra in every room I had actually built. In this industry, everyone is fighting to stand in front of the camera. They want the light. They think the light is the power. They are wrong. The power belongs to the person who writes the words, who builds the stage, who controls the box, who decides, quietly and at exactly the right moment, when to say cut. I walked down the red carpet. My city glittered behind me. I was not a ghost anymore. I was the story.